The atmosphere at Richard Darnell's 50th birthday party was electric. Friends, family, and colleagues had all gathered to toast his half-century milestone. The elegant ballroom glowing under the dim, romantic light. But amidst the laughter and clinking glasses, a quiet tension pulsed, barely noticeable beneath the surface. Richard was the image of sophistication in a dark, tailored suit, grinning as he basked in the center of attention. His wife, Claire, moved gracefully through the room, greeting guests, her smile never faltering. But beneath her calm exterior, her heart raced with anticipation, for she had uncovered a secret so cruel that she could hardly believe it belonged to the man she'd loved for over 2 decades. Just days before the party, Claire had accidentally stumbled upon a hidden email account on Richard's laptop. A simple curiosity had led her down a rabbit hole of deception. There, in black and white, was a stream of emails and photographs that revealed her husband's second life. He was engaged to another woman, a much younger woman named Evelyn, who apparently believed Richard to be a bachelor, blissfully unaware of the wife and 2 children he already had. As the evening drew on, guests shared memories, laughter, and speeches. Claire's pulse quickened as she waited for the perfect moment. She had spent nights wrestling with her decision. Should she confront him in private, spare herself and their children the humiliation? Or did he deserve to be exposed right here, on the night he had planned as his grand celebration? Finally, it was time for Claire's toast. She took the microphone, and silence fell over the room. All eyes were on her as she took a steadying breath. "Thank you all for coming," she began, her voice calm, steady. "Tonight, we celebrate Richard's 50 years, a half-century of life, love, and loyalty. We are surrounded by so many people who love him, and so I think it's only fair that I share something very special with all of you." Richard smiled, proud, thinking she was about to unveil some elaborate surprise. But as she continued, his expression shifted, his smile fading as realization dawned. "Richard," Claire said, turning to look at him, "I've spent over 20 years by your side, sharing everything with you, our dreams, our struggles, our family. And yet, in recent days, I've come to realize I don't know you as well as I thought." The guests murmured, uncertain, but Claire pressed on, her voice unwavering. "For those of you who might not be aware, Richard has an announcement of his own to make tonight." She paused, letting the tension settle. "He's recently proposed to a woman named Evelyn, and I believe the wedding is planned for sometime in spring." The room fell dead silent. Richard froze, his face draining of color as shocked gasps rippled through the crowd. "It's true," Claire said, nodding, her voice breaking slightly. "I just thought it was only right that everyone here celebrate the man in his entirety, the man he is to me, and the man he is to Evelyn." She turned to Richard, eyes blazing, the years of betrayal finally pouring out. "You've shattered this family, Richard. You've taken something sacred and ripped it apart without a second thought. And I won't let you hide behind this celebration while you carry on, deceiving us all." Richard opened his mouth, but no words came. The polished, confident man everyone knew was left speechless, exposed in front of his closest friends and family. The room remained in stunned silence until Claire calmly placed the microphone down and, with a quiet dignity, walked out of the ballroom. The night ended in chaos. Guests murmured in shock, some hastily leaving, others looking at Richard with a mixture of pity and disgust. The scandal unfolded slowly over the coming weeks, as whispers of Richard's double life spread through his social circles and into his professional life, tarnishing his reputation beyond repair. As for Claire, She vanished from the public eye, choosing to begin anew, far from the wreckage of her former life. For those who had witnessed that unforgettable night, Claire's parting words became almost legendary, a haunting reminder of the devastating power of betrayal and the strength of a woman scorned. In the days that followed, Richard found himself reeling from the fallout. His once glittering social circle had turned into a battleground of gossip and cold shoulders. Friends he had known for years stopped returning his calls. Business associates hesitated, wary of his tarnished reputation. He couldn't escape the looks, the narrowed eyes, the whispered conversations that stopped as he entered the room. Everything he had worked for, his meticulously crafted image, was crumbling around him. Meanwhile, Claire's departure left a void, both in his life and in the home they had shared. She had taken their children with her, retreating to her sister's house in a quiet coastal town where the scandal would be just a distant echo. But even away from Richard, the shock lingered. Claire felt raw, vulnerable. The betrayal had cut deep, and though she had exposed him publicly, it felt like little consolation. Her nights were plagued by memories, by years she had once thought were filled with love and loyalty. Yet, as the weeks passed, Claire slowly began to reclaim her life. She embraced the warmth of her family, reconnected with old friends, and, little by little, started to find strength she hadn't known she possessed. Her resolve to protect her children, to give them a stable, honest life away from Richard's deceit, became her anchor. She pursued a new job, finding satisfaction and independence in small victories that helped her rebuild her self-worth. But as Claire grew stronger, Richard descended further into turmoil. Evelyn, the woman he had secretly courted and promised a future, had heard the news through mutual friends even before he had a chance to explain. She had called him only once after the party, her voice shaking with a mixture of fury and heartbreak. "You lied to me," she had said, barely able to contain her anger. "You let me believe you were a different man. Do you have any idea what you've done?" Richard had tried to explain, tried to paint himself as a man in a loveless marriage who had simply been seeking happiness. But Evelyn wasn't swayed. In the end, her voice had softened, and she simply said, "Goodbye, Richard. I don't want anything more to do with you." Richard's life unraveled in every way he hadn't anticipated. The sting of losing Claire was one thing. She had been his companion for over 20 years, after all. But Evelyn's departure wounded him unexpectedly, leaving a hollow ache he couldn't ignore. For the first time, he was forced to confront himself, the man he had become, the lies he had told, not just to his wife and his mistress, but to himself. Desperation drove him to try and mend things with Claire. He sent emails, flowers, long letters that filled pages with apologies, pleading for forgiveness, asking her to come back. But Claire didn't respond. Each letter and message he sent went unanswered, and the silence weighed heavily on him, filling his once proud home with an unbearable emptiness. One evening, months after the infamous party, Richard sat in the darkened living room, the remnants of his once celebrated life scattered around him. Forgotten invitations, dusty awards, photo frames still filled with memories of happier times. The silence was overwhelming, and for the first time, he felt the full consequence of his betrayal, as if every lie he had ever told had returned to haunt him, whispering in the stillness of the empty rooms. And then, just as he felt he had lost everything, he received an envelope in the mail. It was from Claire's lawyer. Inside was a straightforward document outlining the terms of their divorce, a clean, professional severing of the ties they had once shared. There was no anger in the letter, no bitterness, just an eerie calm as if Claire had found peace in finally letting him go. For Richard, it was the final blow. As he signed the papers, he understood that Claire had won, not out of vengeance, but because she had freed herself from him. In that single act, she had chosen her happiness over his betrayal, her dignity over his apologies. Months later, on a crisp autumn morning, Claire found herself standing on a quiet beach, watching her children play in the distance, their laughter blending with the gentle sound of the waves. She felt a sense of closure, a peacefulness that came from having endured something devastating and emerging stronger, with scars that would one day fade but a resolve that would last. And somewhere, Richard watched the world go on without him, realizing that he had been left behind, a relic of a past he had destroyed with his own hands. The life he had betrayed now belonged to someone else, a woman who had found her strength, her voice, and, at last, her freedom. After signing the divorce papers, Richard tried to rebuild his life, but it was as if he had been hollowed out from within. No amount of work or socializing could distract him from the void that now filled his days. For months, he was haunted by memories, questioning every choice, wondering why he had let greed and vanity lead him to such a cruel betrayal. The scandal hadn't just severed his personal relationships, it had rippled through his career as well. Clients, once eager to work with him, withdrew their business. Associates, wary of aligning with someone so publicly disgraced, began distancing themselves. Eventually, Richard's company was forced to let him go, citing the damage his personal life had inflicted on their reputation. Faced with financial strain and social isolation, Richard moved to a modest apartment far from the upscale neighborhood he once called home. His days grew monotonous, punctuated only by the rare calls from old acquaintances who were either too polite or too curious to cut ties completely. But he knew the truth. They all saw him as a cautionary tale, a man who had traded love and loyalty for a fleeting thrill, only to lose everything. Then, one chilly November morning, Richard received an unexpected message, a letter from Evelyn. The letter was short, no longer than a page, but its words cut through him like a knife. "Richard," she wrote, "I have thought long and hard about what happened between us. You hurt me deeply, and the betrayal I felt was profound. But the truth is, I also loved you, at least the version of you I thought I knew. In that strange way, you'll always be a part of my life, but I've moved on. I hope you find a way to make peace with yourself. I hope you learn how to be a better man, even if it's too late for us." He read the letter over and over, feeling the weight of every word. Evelyn's forgiveness, subtle but unmistakable, shook him. It was a mercy he didn't deserve, and yet it was the closest thing to closure he had felt since his life had imploded. Her words stirred something in him, a glimmer of the man he once was before his own arrogance had poisoned everything. Spurred by this, Richard decided to write one final letter to Claire. He had written so many already, but this one felt different. He didn't beg for forgiveness, nor did he try to justify himself. Instead, he simply told her the truth. "Claire," he wrote, "I've hurt you in ways I can barely understand myself. I know I can never make up for the pain I caused you and our family, but I wanted you to know that I'm trying to become a better man, the man I should have been all along. I hope that one day you'll remember me not just for my betrayal, but also for my love, misguided though it was. I've lost you, and I accept that now. All I want is for you to be happy, wherever that takes you." He sent the letter without expecting a reply, but to his surprise, weeks later, a small note arrived from Claire. Her handwriting was still familiar, still beautiful, a quiet echo of the life they'd shared. "Richard, thank you for your letter. I'm glad to hear that you're searching for change. For what it's worth, I want you to know that I don't hate you anymore. Life is too short for resentment. I hope, for both our sakes, that we find peace." The note was simple, but it gave him a sense of release. He tucked it away, a final reminder of the life he had lost, but somehow also a signal of hope. In time, Richard began volunteering at a local shelter, a small gesture he hoped might help him give back some of the good he'd taken. It was quiet work, unseen by anyone who knew him before, but he found solace in it. Though he remained largely alone, he learned to live with his regrets, understanding that, while forgiveness may come, redemption is a choice made every day. As for Claire, she continued her new life, grounded and resilient. She had found a quiet strength, surrounded by friends and family who admired her courage and compassion. Occasionally, she would glance at the photograph of her family from years past, a bittersweet reminder of how things had once been, but also a testament to the life she had rebuilt. And so, their lives went on, each a mirror of the other's mistakes and lessons learned. They never crossed paths again, yet both found something of peace, knowing that the love they once shared, though irrevocably broken, had taught them both something vital about forgiveness, strength, and the courage to rebuild. Years passed quietly after the final exchange between Claire and Richard. Each had moved on in their own way, with time weaving a delicate distance over the raw memories and wounds of their shattered marriage. Yet, on some level, they remained bound, not by love nor resentment, but by the profound lessons their broken union had imparted. Claire had grown in ways she couldn't have imagined during those dark early days. She built a new life from the ground up, stepping fully into her independence, her confidence. With her children now entering young adulthood, she watched them navigate life with a wisdom and resilience that she quietly credited to the lessons she had tried to model. She had raised them to value honesty, self-respect, and courage, and they carried these values proudly. Her own career blossomed in a way she never anticipated. She became known in her industry for her strength, her professionalism, and the integrity she had worked so hard to reclaim. On rare, quiet nights, when she allowed herself a moment of reflection, she would think back on Richard, not with anger, but with a soft sadness, a feeling like a once-beloved book, well-worn and finished, stored away on a high shelf. Their story was a part of her, but it no longer defined her. Richard's life had taken a humbler, more solitary course. He had chosen to live simply, and in the years since his fall from grace, he had gradually embraced a quieter, more honest existence. The old days of high society parties and glittering accolades felt as if they had belonged to someone else, someone he no longer recognized. Now, his days were spent volunteering at the local shelter, working in the background where no one knew his name or his past. Helping others gave him purpose, and for the first time, he found a sort of peace he had never known in his old life. One day, as he was leaving the shelter, he noticed a familiar face in the crowd. It was Claire, walking with her 2 children, who were now grown, tall, confident young adults. She didn't see him, and for a moment, he considered stepping forward, saying hello, reconnecting. But something held him back, a sense that perhaps his place in her life was best left in the past. She looked happy, content, a woman who had built a life of quiet strength. Seeing her, whole and radiant, gave him a final sense of closure. Richard watched her laugh with their children as they walked away, and he realized that in the end, this was all he had ever wanted for her. He had failed her in so many ways, yet she had come out stronger, and knowing this allowed him to release whatever lingering regrets he still carried. In that moment, He turned and walked in the opposite direction, feeling the weight of his past dissolve. For both Claire and Richard, the journey had been painful and humbling, a testament to the complexities of love and the cost of betrayal. But through it all, they had emerged stronger, shaped by the hardest lessons life had to offer. And so, without fanfare, without one last word, they each continued forward, carrying the quiet knowledge that they had both found, if not happiness, then something close to peace. It was perhaps not the ending they had imagined in the days when love was new, but it was the one that life had written for them, a conclusion marked not by bitterness or regret, but by acceptance, resilience, and the steady, enduring rhythm of life moving on.